So how is it that we can best hope to know ourselves as individuals? We live short lives with fallible minds prone to delusion. It's so easy to deceive ourselves with regards to our true nature. We can come to identify ourselves with the things we possess, or ephemeral beliefs we hold, or arbitrary lines drawn on a map, or our man-made political or cultural labels. At the end of the day, none of this is deeply real, because none of it is innate, coming from the inside out. The blood flowing through our veins is real. The genetic code that informs every cell in our body how to best express itself is something we inherit, something within us. When seeking to understand oneself, looking back at one's life can be informative. But this is a short period of time, replete with personal errors and missteps, and even more importantly, liable to be misunderstood or misinterpreted. But what if we'd lived 1,000 lives before, in slightly different manifestations and projections, amidst countless environments and conditions across the span of time? This is the power of history. The blood that flows through your veins has lived before, countless times before. An understanding of our roots helps inform us of who we are and how to best be and grow. Cut off from this understanding, we can't help but live in confusion and anxiety. It's a state of true ignorance. There's nothing more informative than an accurate picture of history. It's not only a record of our own personal journey, but of the intersection and intertwining of all journeys in a multitude of unique circumstances. Obtaining a totality of perfect context here, if such a thing were possible, would lead to an unprecedented level of understanding of ourselves and our reality. Historical context is crucial, and without it, we're very much unmoored beings. We live in the age of the atomized individual, an age in which we're taught that we're all blank slates and fresh starts, entirely shaped by our environmental impulses. And it's true that your every external impulse does shape the expression of the true you within, but at our deepest levels, the blood flowing through our veins and the genes we were gifted with still remain the central pillar around which all else rotates. The pillar that contains all possible expressions within it. Understanding this central pillar is profoundly important. I've begun this video series to help counteract what I see as an attempt at obfuscating, mischaracterizing, or destroying our understanding of our collective central pillar, the subversion of our conception of history and of our historical roots. What scant history we're now taught is often dull and lifeless, a recitation of dry facts and figures by professors who feel no connection to the subject matter. A tedious sermon, often delivered in a nasal monotone. But it's more than just poorly delivered. It's often wildly dishonest, misinformative, robbing us of that power that comes from true understanding. One can't properly orient and direct their future unless they understand their past. And a true understanding isn't communicated by the clinical and detached memorization of trivia and pointless details, but in the deeper understanding and feeling the collective experiences of their ancestors. This will be the most important video I've made thus far, as well as the most daunting, difficult, controversial, and dangerous to my channel. I've long asked myself the question, how should one best act when they come to know important truths against which the majority of the population has been deeply prejudiced, programmed to not only reject, but to misunderstand the intent behind their voicing? We're now in such dire straits that the best path forward is clear. Regardless of the cost of doing so, these truths must be told. We need to realize our hand has been forced, and if we don't drop our pathological and suicidal altruism, and begin to courageously speak truths once again, it's our own future generations that'll pay the price for our cowardice and dishonesty. Over time, I'll certainly receive a backlash from several subsets of people, and I fully understand it. For years, they've been exposed to the most backward pseudoscience, wearing the mask of legitimate thought, on the topics of race, human history, genetics, human migrations. They've been subjected to the most intellectually lazy lumping together of race realism with racial hatred. Most of us recognize the subversion of our financial and political systems, our media and entertainment. When I began to see similar red flags with regards to the teaching of history, I became a skeptic overnight. I should clarify, I became a true skeptic in the proper definition of the word, which meant I became the polar opposite of those who call themselves skeptics today, the type who've never met a conventional narrative pushed by the status quo that they didn't unthinkingly embrace and seek to defend with dogmatic fervor. Over time, I felt unable to trust any source of information implicitly, because even those with genuine intent can be hoodwinked by reading the materials of those with less genuine intent. So I instead sought to immerse myself only in root historical sources, meaning the older the better, and the more first-hand the better. To this day, I believe this to be the best approach to a landscape so rife with subversion and sloppy thinking. I've always found it amusing how many conventional thinkers approach conspiracies or any nefarious actions behind the scenes as a virtual impossibility. They basically trust our system and our media, and make the argument that in any significant conspiracy, someone would have to talk, and thus the entire house of cards would fall. This is an idea so absurd it deserves its own video, but to briefly summarize, not only does our controlled press routinely ignore whistleblowers or inconvenient truth-tellers of every stripe to avoid biting the hand that feeds them, but this whistleblower conception isn't how such things actually transpire in the real world. The vast majority of people involved in any conspiracy are completely oblivious to the role they play within it. I believe this holds true for most of those currently working together to subvert our understanding of history. There was a quote I recently posted to Twitter that I haven't been able to stop thinking about since, as it so perfectly illustrates how most conspiratorial subversion actually takes place over time. Quote, "The smart way to keep people passive and obedient is to strictly limit the spectrum of acceptable opinion, but allow very lively debate within that spectrum, even encourage the more critical and dissident views. That gives people the sense that there's free thinking going on, while all the time the presuppositions of the system are being reinforced by the limits put on the range of the debate." Think about this quote in the context of race. We no longer allow positive things to be said about those of an Indo-European background as a group. And simultaneously, we not only allow but encourage negative things. The opposite is true for every other group. And these are the guidelines within which all related discussions are currently carried out. The same holds true for all relevant publications, and even all research and analysis, because these are all, at the end of the day, controlled by money. If we start out with the foundational premise that there are no differences between peoples in any innate ability or skill set, this means any piece of the historical record that seems to highlight these differences must be misinformed or a product of racism, and must be reinterpreted accordingly to allow for a more just and equitable narrative. Additionally, those best suited to this new religion and its morality, meaning those most, quote, anti-racist, end quote, in their outlook, will most swiftly rise through the ranks in their respective fields into positions of ever greater influence and reach. In other words, no vast conspiracy was needed to completely toss out everything we knew about race and history prior to World War II, and replace it with a speculative hodgepodge of nonsense This happened organically, as useful idiots and willing tools pursued their own best interests. If you want a promotion, regurgitate Jared Diamond's offensively stupid ideas. If you'd like to be fired, ally yourself with a consensus opinion of practically every major thinker prior to 1945. So which is more likely? Were all of these great pre-World War II thinkers from nations all across the world vicious racists driven by hatred, who simply wanted to feel better about themselves, causing them to pen book after book of misinformation? Or is our current politically correct atmosphere preventing honest discussion on controversial topics? The answer to this question is obvious, and yet most of us have no idea of just how bad things have become on this front. Nationalists in places like India and Egypt, to give just two examples of many, have taken over their own academic fields, with help of the usual subversives, and are largely promoted on the basis of just how effectively they're able to dismiss the contributions of the Indo-European element, and attribute all former greatness of their regions to themselves. Various organizations have been created to lock down important sites and control archaeological research, and the processing of all artifacts. Back in America, the Smithsonian has a nasty habit of misplacing countless artifacts that don't cleanly fit the conventional model of history, never to be seen again. And the youth are taught that it's practically heroic to tear down statues of white historical figures of old. In Sweden, the new Minister for Culture, of African descent, has ordered Viking artifacts to be melted down and recycled. On every front, from every angle, history is being destroyed and rewritten. This has been maddening to watch, and I've not even scratched the surface with what I just laid out. It's clear to me why this is happening. Since I began the process of immersion in the most trustworthy historical records I've been able to find over the years, I kept coming back to the thought that a truly honest and objective historical account, if written in our age, would appear as the single most racist book ever authored, assuming one defines the word racist to be referring to a belief in differences in ability or achievement, as opposed to racial hatred. The same forces that so effectively hijacked academia post-World War II did so to impose a new worldview, a new framework. One could even call it a religion. And nothing threatens this construct more than hard historical truths. These topics are so subverted, so deeply muddied and confused, that to find our way out of this mess we need to engage in efficient detective work, and only present those ideas and concepts we're most confident in, to improve the signal-to-noise ratio. So my first goal is to provide the broad strokes, and then work to fill in the finer points over time. I feel like I know much more than I'm voicing just yet, and I expect this will be the first in a series of videos on the topic, but always I'll be striving to only speak where I have a great deal of confidence. We live in an age of information overload, and we desperately need quality, not quantity. So here's my attempt at that. Those currently dominating the historical narrative are isolationist, as opposed to diffusionist in their perspective, meaning they believe most nations and cultures, especially those separated by large bodies of water, to have been incapable of contact and interchange with one another. This foundational premise has helped to sabotage our understanding of our past.